So yeah, TBC. Um, I I know you said you want to start with TBC. So what exactly did you want to start off with?
I think the first thing is Group Finder.
Group Finder.
Um, my main thing with it is, I think, I know we touched on this a little before we started the video, but I think a way like retail has it, where it's like a little list and you can like go through it, would be pretty nice. Just because it limits the spam in chat, because I know that's a bigger issue that a lot of people have with Classic is it's all just chat spam with it, which I feel like it's still gonna happen, but a lot less with having a system built in for it. But also, I think they release it at a later date if they decide to do it.
You mean the LG? You think they're gonna release that at a later date?
I
I
think they should.
I don't see them doing that because that's like a core like UI function system. That's not like
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean they could. I think
I
they
mean, they could have it implemented, just not usable.
if I remember correctly, they did something like that with like they did that in MOP actually. 5.4. That's when they introduced Flex and when they introduced Mythic.
Yeah.
So I could see them maybe doing that. Or and
It's just,
or in Kata when they introduced LFR in
yeah.
Dragon Soul. I could see them doing that. I don't think they would do that for LFG. I think they
Well,
would introduce it at the start if they're gonna introduce it for
because
sure.
like at the start, you don't need it. There's so many people around your level, and finding people isn't going to be an issue because everyone's going to be doing that similar content. But look at Classic now, for example. If you're trying to dungeon level by not getting boosted, that's difficult because either everyone's getting boosted or no, like you just don't find groups for anything. So I think when it becomes harder to find people, having that group finder that's like out there for somebody to use who's leveling normally or still leveling at a much later date, it'll be a lot easier. But I don't think it's really needed at the start because everyone's going to be in that same area of content for a while. That's why I think a later date would be better, but I mean, also having it right at the start is not going to be an issue
Well,
anyways because it'll just make it a little quicker.
my only I disagree with that because the reason why it was like that in Classic is because you just had a much larger level range and way so many zones and way so many dungeons.
That's
Whereas in
fair.
TBC, it's kind of like what 8 dungeons, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah,
It's not a
somewhere in there.
lot. It's only 10 level difference. Most likely, if you're looking for a group to do a dungeon, even on normal, you're gonna be able to find a group to do it on normal.
And I guess you're going to be in the same area if you're looking for that dungeon
Yeah,
because
I mean,
most of the time
I
most of the time you're either going to be in chat or in that zone that the dungeon's in.
yeah, I don't think it's really gonna be that big of a deal to where they would want to introduce it later if they were gonna introduce it at all. I think if they were going to introduce it, they would do it at the start. Now, do I agree with them introducing it? I don't think so. It gets kind of weird because again, I before we started this, I did kind of say that like it did sort of come out in TBC. If you want to
Yeah.
consider the pre-patch as TBC, I don't
Um
know. I
that's kind of my thing with it is like I don't think it's needed in TBC
I don't think it's really
because
needed, and I don't think it's really wanted. Therefore, if that's the case, you probably just shouldn't do it. Again,
especially with that point that you just touched on that it's a lot less zones, a lot less level range, and a lot less dungeons.
yeah,
I don't think it's going to be needed.
I just don't think it's that needed. Now, you could make an argument for classic zones, doing that for classic zones on TBC. Like, maybe they wouldn't do it specifically for TBC zones. They're doing it
Hmm.
for the classic dungeons, because Lord knows, right now on classic, I'm struggling to find people to do SM just on
Yeah.
my own, like on Faralina. Um,
Yeah,
so and
that's a
that's
weird
yeah,
situation, I think.
yeah.
Because if you release it for Classic, might as well have it for TBC, but it's like it's either both get it or none get it, is how I'm looking at it.
I don't know. I really don't know how they do it. I think if they were going to introduce something like that, the best thing I could ask for is the pre-made group system on retail, because that system's pretty good. The problem is it's
Yeah.
opened up to it's the big gripe I have with the pre-made group system on retail is, one, you use it for everything, because legitimately like arenas you use it, RBGs you use it,
Yeah.
Mythic Plus you use it, raids you use it, unless you're like in a guild and you're doing Mythic. You use it for everything. So I worry about it being a crutch. Another thing is it makes botting a lot more profitable,
Hmm.
because if you look at the pre-made system on retail, 70% of the posts are want to sell and then go to this website, and it's just,
Yeah.
it creates an unhealthy, toxic environment. I have an add-on on retail that gets rid of all of those, but most people don't. Um,
Okay, so what about having another chat section?
what do you mean?
Um,
That's
so
not
when I was
doesn't
looking
that
through
already
that
exist?
Wowhead post,
Doesn't that already exist?
there is a looking for group one, but what if they did like a looking for dungeon or looking for raid one? Like one specifically for that content, because like LFG, everyone's using it for, like in classic right now, it's all cells.
Well, don't people use
Um,
trade chat for that? I swear people
they
advertise
do
for
as
raids
well,
in
but
trade chat.
LFG reaches everybody who has that as a chat in any zone. It's not restricted to who's in a city. So people post in both. Looking for group is more popular, I would like to say. But if they're in a city, they're obviously going to do it in trade because you either have one or the two open. But seeing something like an LFR chat, I think wouldn't be bad. Or I don't know, something different to separate the looking for group section, which you could be used for dungeons, and then like one for raid or heroics or something like that. Just
Um,
another. I mean, it's still going to get blown up,
it's
but I think.
it's actually getting really weird for me, because I'm actually starting to, before, ask me a few months ago, I would have been completely for like all these nice quality of life changes and stuff, but for some reason recently I've actually started to become a bit more Puritan when it comes to the
Uh huh.
TBC. Like the no, but it's literally just because of like nostalgia, and because I'm starting to resent retail a lot more as time goes on, especially during the Shadowlands, and I kind of would like just the purity aspect of TBC to just remain not retail.
Yeah.
Um, but my gripes with retail aren't necessarily what they're doing to TBC. Like, I don't really have a problem with the boost in retail, so therefore I don't really have a problem with it in TBC. But it's by nature of how, for lack of better terminology, shitty I think retail is. At the very least, I don't think Burning Crusade, from my memories, was shitty. I'd like it to not be possibly tainted, but I also don't want to level a character from 1 to 58 because you know what I mean? I don't know. It's
Right.
weird. I'm in this weird dilemma with it.
I
Something
think.
like that, I don't think would be that big of an issue though. Like just extra chat channels for.
Yeah, I think like an extra chat channel for. I mean, I know they can't restrict what's posted in each one, but I think having something else for like raids, because that's going to be a bigger thing just because of the attunement process compared to what classics had.
Maybe.
But I feel like it's going to be a lot less spammy with how the dungeons are going to go.
There's a topic that I. This is it was a Wowhead post about it. It wasn't.
Hmm.
It didn't get that big. But I was scrolling through some of the because Blizzard, not Blizzard, Wowhead has like a whole section dedicated towards classic announcements and just
Right.
classic. And one of the ones that I just completely skimmed over and didn't even notice was, hold on.
Are you
There's
finding it?
no. I was just swallowing. Um, there's an article about achievements in classic era servers being
Mm,
data mined. Did you see
yes.
that?
So I did read into that because I was curious, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually went back to the BlizzCon video when they were talking about classic era servers.
Yeah.
And what they said was with Classic era servers, which assuming Classic's gonna have one when Wrath comes out, TBC will have one. And I think it's just a few quality of life changes that they want to make, like achievements, because Classic content's done. So you have, like, you clear next, what else are you gonna do? Like, you get your tier 3. There's not much else to do besides PvP, which is just BGs.
Yeah.
And another thing they talked about was having the newer honor system in it. So the TBC honor system, but put into Classic to make it an easier grind for people who want to stay on those Classic era servers.
That's really weird.
That is really
I
weird.
wouldn't do that.
Yeah, the honor system I'm a little iffy on, but stuff like achievements I think would be really nice, because
I
for completionists, which
I
if you stay
guess.
on
I mean,
Classic, I feel like that's the kind of person you want to be, or that you are,
I guess
unless you
it
really just
doesn't.
enjoy Classic.
I guess it doesn't harm anything to have achievements, really. Um, kind of just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really gonna touch Classic
Kind
era
of just don't care.
servers.
Now, you could get me onto something about like doing stuff in Classic and that giving you achievements in retail. That is something I think they should have done and they missed out on big time. Um,
So like Classic era achievements, something like that.
like you do something on a Classic or TBC server and then
Mm.
you get some sort of achievement or whatever on retail. I'm not saying
Mm.
that like you get Scarab Lord in Classic, that means you get
Right.
it in retail as well. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like there are specific like achievements for that were made for retail, like hit level 70 in Burning Crusade Classic, and that just put in an achievement like in retail, and you get that on retail. Something like that, I think would be kind of cool. Um,
I think it'd be cool if there was like a retail reward for it, like like you said, like hit level 70. Not saying you would get anything just for that, but like, okay, so let's say you clear Black Temple at when that date comes.
yeah,
You get, something like a toy or something that is, TBC related, that is because you cleared Black Temple in TBC Classic. I think that would be a cool thing for retail players to play both, or for Classic players to try retail again or for the first time. Because they're like, hey, I completed this achievement, or I want to complete this achievement because I want this item. So I think it kind of gives both games a higher player base because of the people who are dedicated to one side. So I think that wouldn't be a bad idea, but I don't know how that would be coded unless it's through BattleNet
um,
achievements if they
yeah, it
did
would have
that.
to be an account achievement on BNet, which I mean, not that hard to do.
I think they should do
There's a
that, but
few. I think there's a few for Diablo actually. It's how
mm,
you got. I don't know. I could be wrong. I remember looking through the achievement icons at some point, or like you can make macros. You can pick like through all the icons in the game,
mm,
and they have like the files to them have actual like names to them. And there
right,
was one that was literally like the Diablo 2 icon, where it's like that guy's like red face or whatever,
right.
and that was like under an achievement like thing. So it could probably. I don't imagine it'd be that hard for them to
Right.
do something like that. I think it's something they should do for sure. Um,
So what are your thoughts on drums?
I don't know enough about the drums thing. I really need to do more research about TBC
Hmm.
because as much as I want to say it was like my favorite expansion, I was like 6 when I played it, 6 or 7, and
So a quick rundown on drums is
I know that you have to be like it's a very close range, and it's like it doesn't give you a flat percent. It gives you like an actual
mhm,
like number of a
right.
haste or whatever, and you basically you want to have everyone being leatherworking because back then you could rotate them pretty much indefinitely and
Yes.
have a you know I don't know if it was
So
equatable to a bloodlust, but
it was so basically what you would do is, like you said, it was a closer range, but you wanted everyone leatherworking because, not that it was stackable, but there was okay, so forbearance basically. with Pally's. You can't cast a similar ability after a
Yeah, it
minute.
was like a 2-minute cooldown, and it lasted like 30 seconds or something. So
Right.
you wanted like at
You could
least four
stack them.
people in a group, so you can. Yeah.
You could basically, I pop it. Once mine runs out, you pop it. And you could basically continuously have a drums buff up the entire fight on every fight.
Yeah, and I know that Blizzard they've data mined greater versions of those drums, which are
Mm-hmm.
presumably going to drop from I think Zolaman. They said.
Yes.
Um, which essentially just make it so that they cost a little bit more to make, but they're not. I think they have like a way wider like radius, which means
Mm-hmm.
that you. I mean, I don't know. Like if you're in a group, like in raid, I don't think you're really gonna be spread 40 yards apart or whatever the
Yeah,
greater drums
because most of
do.
the fights is um there's specific fights excluded from that because the range do have to be farther apart, like similar to how Rag's fight plays out. All the melee are stacked, but the range are spread out so they don't get hit by a knock-up ability, which ends up wiping the raid. But um, most of the time, it's um, like everyone's stacked or in close radius, but you're able to repetitively keep drums up on top of Bloodlust, if I'm correct. I don't think they share a similar. I think you can stack those. I'm not 100% on that, but it was just basically the idea of being able to keep drums up the entire fight for every fight is what a lot of people were against. And that's why they wanted or that's why the idea is having everyone leatherworking so you can continuously rotate them.
What I've seen is that what Blizzard like they've said they want to make it so drums don't do that is, but they at the BlizzCon announcement they said they want to specifically change leatherworking or drums so that they aren't mandatory. The problem is we're pretty not I don't want to say deep into the beta cycle, but
Mm-hmm.
you would think we would have seen some more development in that front. Um, in regards
Yes,
to
but
it, and
also,
we haven't. There's
yeah,
like we've seen the greater drums, and we know they drop from Zolaman, but looking at them, they don't really do much different. And
right.
there's nothing said about like changing how drums work functionally, at least not yet. So currently, as we're speaking, it looks like everyone's still going to be going leatherworking. Um, if you're
Which
really trying to min
sucks.
max, if you're really trying to min max, everyone's going leatherworking. I don't think your
Right.
average run of the mill like guild is going to need to do that. Um,
But
but
a lot of the higher tier who are
if
trying to
what
get
if what I
world
think
first
we're
are.
trying to do, we're all gonna need to go the leatherworking currently as we speak.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, I hope they decide to change it
I don't see
because
like that's difficult for me. Because it is the way it was in Classic. You could do that
right.
in original TBC. There were some guilds that did do that. Pretty sure that was a thing that actually a lot of guilds did.
I
But
mean, it was just good to make sure everyone had a haste buff. It was like just it's just strong for everybody. But I think like I don't mind it still being an item, but I don't like and I just hate the whole mandatory factor with it
well,
because
it's
it's
well
that
okay.
good.
So if you're someone who pugs or LFGs, I could see that being a problem. If
Right.
it's mandatory in pugs and you know not guild groups, I could see that being a problem. In guild groups, that's just the nature of how guild groups work, especially if
Yeah.
you're doing like high end content. Like for us on retail, like mandatory stuff like that is just how like that's just how guilds work. Is you got to meet
Hmm.
quotas, you have to do certain stuff, especially if you're trying to do like high end like mythic and stuff. So that's not really my contention with it. My contention is that does it detract overall from like most of the player base's enjoyment, and does it detract from it in a way that is unhealthy? And I'm tempted to say that it kind of does, because having everyone go a single profession because it's that good might be kind of toxic, but at the
Yeah.
same time professions have always been like that. Engineering was insane if you wanted to PvP at all in Classic. If you
Hmm.
didn't have engineering, you weren't PvPing adequately. You were just worse than everybody else. is the same thing in MOP. I'm pretty sure if you weren't engineering as like a melee, you were just losing out because back then, I think in MOP and Kata and stuff, professions gave like stat increases for some reason. So like I think engineering gave you just a bunch of agility. So
Right.
if you were a rogue and you weren't like in raid, if you were a rogue and you weren't engineering, you missed out on a lot of agility.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, your average guild isn't going to require you to be engineering back then, like in MOP. But like, if you're trying to do like mythic or heroic
You're
for
gonna have
most
to
of
be, yeah.
MOP, you had to be engineering if you really wanted to min max. Um, is that a
Yeah, I think
problem? I don't know. I really don't.
yeah, I'm not
I
I'm
have
kind
a
of in the middle
see.
right now
The
with
thing is,
drums
like,
specifically.
the it's so like, is it more toxic than the world buff meta?
I think so.
I don't think so.
Well, because with the world buff meta,
The world buff meta
it
required.
wasn't taking a profession from everyone.
It
And I think
wasn't,
that is
but it.
I think that's the biggest issue with it though. Or one of the biggest
The
issues.
thing is, it didn't take a profession from people, but it took hours of time from people, like
Right.
just
But once
unnecessarily.
you
It
got to that point, all you
no,
were doing
but
was raiding.
it's not even that. It took like you not even being able to play the game if you wanted to from people. Like if you had a world buff and
Yeah.
you knew a raid was coming up soon and you didn't want to risk it, that sucks for you. Log out. You're not playing.
But when
I
you get
think
to that
that's
point
more
where you're raiding,
toxic.
what else are you doing? In Classic specifically.
I don't know, but that's not my point. My
Like,
point is if it's somebody that wants to play, just that feeling of I can't play because I have this world buff and I have to save it for raid, that's just terrible. I don't know. That
yeah.
seems really, really toxic. Way more toxic than getting drums for raid every time you raid is could ever be.
Yeah, but with like looking at professions, I think it's pretty bad because for warriors who want to PvP and also want to go raid, you can't go mining and blacksmithing for your mace. I forgot what the name was, but the mace that has the chance on stun, and then you go mace spec, which is more stuns. That whole arms meta. You can't have mining and blacksmithing, so you can have blacksmithing, but you still have to purchase all the newer ores off
That's
of.
normal though. See, like I
I think that's just really
that's just people wanting.
crappy.
I think that's just people wanting to have too many professions at once. I don't think you can like be this jack of all trades and like be insane at everything. Like you're gonna have
Yeah.
you can only have two major professions. You're gonna have to pick some eventually. Like in retail, if I really wanted to min max, I would be tailoring and I would be like enchanting or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not because I like to do other stuff. And that's just an example. It's not the
Right.
best example, but you get my point. It's like if you're doing hard enough content, you're gonna have to make decisions, regardless. Again, classic is the best example. If you wanted to PvP in classic, but you're also raiding and you needed, let's say you're a mage, okay? If you're a mage, you wanted the PvP and PvE, you wanted to be engineering because you wanted the sapper charges, right? So you blink in sapper charge and like arcane
Yeah.
explosion. If you but if you wanted to raid, obviously you wanted to be tailoring or something for a Bloodvine set or whatever you're currently going for. Or some other stuff. I don't know that much about the professions in classic, but I
Right.
imagine that it follows those lines somewhat. But let's say that you also wanted to be an alchemist so you can provide flasks and stuff to the guild and whatever. Well, that sucks. You're gonna have to pick. That's just how professions work.
Yeah.
I don't really see that as being like that big of an issue, to be honest.
Oh no,
If
I just think it.
because it's just
I think
like
if it wasn't as good, and where everyone's like, hey, if we're doing guild runs, you gotta have drums because it's that important. I think if they nerfed it a little bit
I
and it's still usable, but it's not required, I think that's where it's at a good spot.
I just think if it's really just a problem with guild runs where people are requiring it, I don't see that as a problem.
Well,
Especially if it's literally just raid. If it's just raid and really
yeah,
only guild groups that are requiring that sort of thing, I don't
but
really see it as a problem.
with pugs, I feel like I know it might not be that big of an issue, but I could see people being like, "Hey, you have to have drums because it makes the content easier and it's gonna make this pug run a lot smoother." And I think that's where it could be an
That's where it
issue, but
could get
also I don't know
scary.
how
Okay,
big it's gonna
so
be.
was the world buff thing? I see the world buff thing as way worse than the drum sync could ever be. Was the world buff thing like required for pugs? Like, did people require you to have world buffs? I don't think they did, right? Like, it
No,
wasn't.
because most of the time they were running. A lot of the pugs were either Molten Core or um, ZG, and they would just have a full kitted tier 3 tank and healer and maybe a DPS, and that would be it.
If that's the case, then I don't really see it. I don't see the leather working drums being like meta for pugs in TBC. I just don't. Because I think the world buffs were way more impactful than the drubs are gonna be.
Right. But also, it's just the repetitive use of it, which I think could be an issue. Because, like, with world buffs, obviously they had a cooldown.
Okay, you could make an argument, I think, about removing it in terms of a gameplay like issue, because it's probably not very fun to be like staring at cooldowns for drums every
Right.
30 seconds, 20 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever the hell the timer is.
Yeah.
It's probably not fun. Probably not fun to have a separate, like macro or something, whatever people would
Mm-hmm.
put it on for it. But again, that's if you're doing hard enough content where that's expected of you, that's just the nature of doing hard enough content where that's expected of you.
And on the point of world buffs, I think with pugs, it's like you can't really say, hey, you have to have world buffs because you can't really raid log for a pug because it's kind of just sporadic. But I think with pugs and TBC, they could be like, hey, I'm not inviting you if you're not leatherworking because you don't have drums. Because it's just an easier. It's like easier, not easier to check, but like I was saying, like you can't raid log for a pug because you don't know if it's gonna be there or if it's not. So that's why I guess they didn't require it. But I think drums could be a bigger issue because it's something that everyone quote unquote should have if you're raiding. That's how I think it could be used in pugs or needed for pugs.
I don't know. I just don't see jumps being that big of an issue. Um,
I mean,
it'll be annoying for me for sure. I like
yeah,
I,
me too,
yeah.
actually,
If we're you know we're trying
because
to
I need to
really
be
push it. I mean,
tailoring.
we're
I guess I'm gonna
again.
be tailoring and leatherworking.
Um,
Thinking about
I
it now.
I don't know. It's hard because there are some trinkets that are really good for
Yeah.
healing.
Well, for me, I need to go tailoring for the frozen shadow weave set
I think
because it just gives me heals
I
off of
don't.
my frost bolts.
I'm gonna have to relook at the list. I think I get some shadowy. Maybe I'm just dumb. I'm probably just dumb. I'm not.
What are you
Remember.
going? You're healing, right?
Yeah, I'm healing. Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows?
I don't remember exactly what I'm going. Um,
Um,
but
you
I know that
might.
there's like an alchemist stone that's really good for
Yeah.
healing. Um,
I mean, you might get a piece just because if since the debuff slots go from 16 to 64 in TBC, you might throw a Shadow Word Pain out, but that's very minimal,
no,
like
I don't think
min-maxy healing on you.
I don't think I would be. I mean, if I do, I do. I don't
Yeah,
think I have the mana to I think mana matters a lot more. Mana 100% matters a lot more in
for sure.
TBC than it does in retail. If it were retail, I'd completely agree with you. In fact, that's how
Yeah.
you play priest in retail. But
I mean, again, depends on the fight and depends on the comp you have on mana, but if you happen to go that, I think that's wise because you can throw those Shadow Word Pains out for the min-maxy
maybe I don't know.
heals.
Again, I don't know enough about
Right.
TBC. Unfortunately, I wish I knew more. But
I'll help you look into it.
no, I appreciate it, buddy.
All right, so on to 9-1. Is there any other TBC thoughts you have before we jump over?
Um, just not really. I mean, we could get into the whole prop pally meta thing if you really wanted to, but
I'm not having that conversation with you again. I'm
yeah,
not doing it.
yeah, that's fine. I know I won. It's whatever. Uh, yeah,
So
we
what are your
can.
thoughts on the raid?
9.1. Sorry, I'm still
Bosses.
thinking about prop pally thing.
I hate you. The raid, like bosses,
I
Anduin
think it's I
theories.
think it's cool. Um, I really hope so. I kind of looked. The bosses are on the PTR already, and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing boss testing pretty soon. I think my guild is doing raid testing.
Right.
Which I will maybe try to be there for. Um, and if that's the case, I looked through some of the abilities, and it makes it sound. I mean, it gets in kind of spoiler territory, so I don't know how much I want to go into spoiler territory. You don't care because you don't play
Oh, I don't care.
retail really, but for anyone watching, I might just be like, "Hey, spoiler warning here." As far as just generally what I think of the raid, I think it's a cool idea. I didn't think we'd be doing it this soon, to be honest.
I didn't either.
Literally, the first
Like,
tier, we're already fighting Sylvanas.
I was expecting her to be 9-2 and then the jailer 9-3, but I wonder what they're gonna put in between unless the jailer is 9-2 and then something bigger happens into like not an introduction into 10.0. Oh wow, that sounds weird to say. Um, but similar to how they did BFA, it was all very like, you're over here, you're over there, and then boom, N'Zoth's here. So they might continue that trend. Um, which I mean, I'm okay with, but
I
see,
do. Well, I'm pretty sure the end boss is gonna be Jailer. I don't.
right.
I'm pretty sure they confirmed that. Um, I I'm really. All right, we're gonna get into kind of spoiler territory here.
You
So
better have a flash warning of like, hey,
if you're
spoilers, and then we continue.
spoilers ahead, you have 3, 2, 1 seconds to skip to a later point in the video or to stop watching. If you don't know, this just came out.
Mhm.
The jailer is, the Dreadlords,
Right.
not the jailer. Sire Denathrius.
Mhm.
Um, he is the leader of the Dreadlords. He's the master of the Nathrazim,
Yeah.
the Dreadlord race. I think this was confirmed a long time ago. Sort of.
I do remember
Like
reading this
we knew
though.
he had something to do with them. I don't think we knew that he was like the leader of them. It's been confirmed he's the leader of them, which, if you really think about it, is actually really cool because if Denathrius is in league with the jailer, and the Denathrius is also the leader of the Nathrazim,
Mhm.
who is the Dreadlord that tricked Arthas into getting Frostmourne and the Armor of Dominion or Domination?
And we are seeing him come back this raid, aren't we?
Who?
Nozul?
We're seeing Ner'zhul come back.
Yeah. Well, I guess he was in the armor,
We're
but
also seeing Mal'Ganis at some point, which is the Dreadlord that tricked Arthas into
yes.
getting the Armor of Domination.
Oh, this is gonna be interesting.
I think it's really cool they sort of tied that together. And
Hmm.
there are some other characters we're seeing. Garrosh is one of them that people are really looking
Yeah.
forward to. Um, okay, I'm gonna get spoilery with some of the boss fights, but people are
Go
gonna
for
learn
it.
about this eventually. I don't think it's that big of a spoiler. It's literally going
Yeah.
to be the
And
boss
if you're I
fights.
think if you're keeping up with it, it's like
They're literally
you're
going to
gonna
be the
know it
boss fights.
anyways.
I'm not talking about the outcome of the boss fights because obviously I don't know, but this is just
Yeah.
the stuff I read on the PTR. What it looks like is there's some, I forget which boss it is. There's some boss fight where we're trying to help Garrosh. I don't remember which one it is. I think that's something like that though. Like we're
Mhm.
empowering Garrosh somehow, or we're taking like his anima and then we're using that to like fight whatever the boss is.
Huh.
Kal'Thuzad, I think we're killing for good because
Thank
they kind of
goodness.
make it sound very clear, like in the thing, like this is like he's gonna die here or
I
something.
mean,
Like this is the last time
if
you're
you
seeing
kill
him.
somebody in the Shadowlands, where do they go from
At
there?
least that's how they make it sound. They say something like, he's prepared. He's everything has led up to this moment, like the final stand or whatever.
Right.
With Kal'Thuzad, that's like in the dungeon journal. And then the Sylvanas fight, it sounds like the jailer's trying to do something. Like the jailer's legitimately a part of the fight, and Sylvanas is trying to stop us from preventing the jailer from doing something. That's what it sounds like when I read it. I can get on the PTR real quick and I
Okay.
can like read off exactly what it said. The fight
That's
sounds
alright.
really cool. Like it sounds like we're gonna be flying and shit. Like or like there's gonna be like pillars falling down and like whatever. It sounds
Hmm.
really really cool. Sylvanas goes in like a banshee mode or whatever. At some point she gets purified because that model has already been leaked on Wildhead.
Sad redemption arc.
Well, it could be like a flashback sequence. We don't know. Like that might.
That would be
It's just a model.
okay. Wait.
It's just a model. So it literally could just be a flashback sequence where she just has that model and it's way before any of this shit even happened. Like not even a part of the fight. It's literally just some like quest line or whatever. It could just be that. We don't know.
Okay. Theorizing here. Didn't we also see that there was a purified Uther model as well?
Yep. Yeah, there was.
Okay, so the bow that she drops, the
Yeah.
hunter bow,
Yep.
does have flavor text on it, and it's about her before the Lich King kills her the first time.
Yeah.
That is what the flavor text on it. That could just be because that's been her bow or whatever that may be.
Also, fun fact, that is the second time I think we've been able to acquire her bow. The first time was in the end time. The end time
Yes.
version in Kata. I remember
was.
specifically wanting that bow because I played a hunter back then. I thought it looked cool.
So maybe it is a flashback sequence with her, Anduin related because of what he said, unless he's not in there. I don't know, obviously.
No, Anduin's for sure in the raid, I'm pretty sure.
So it could be because like in that cinematic that when he was talking to her before they, transformed him into Arthas 2.0, he basically was talking to her about like, you have a choice. I know you didn't before, basically stuff like that. So it could be that same idea, flashback, Arthas, Uther, her? Question mark? I don't know.
I have no clue.
That would be pretty cool though to see that cinematic happen with everything updated.
I'll be honest. The thing out of all this that intrigues me the most is Garrosh. I really want to see what happens with Garrosh. I want to see what they do with him because we're not supposed to like Garrosh, but we are supposed to feel the slightest bit sympathetic towards him because Thrall did kind of fuck him over.
Yeah.
Big time.
But
at the same time, that doesn't really excuse going on a xenophobic tirade and trying to wipe out everyone with the powers of the old gods, right? That doesn't really excuse that, but at the same time,
you get killed by Thrall, that excuses all the war crimes you did.
At the same time,
of course,
he's kind of a kid, and whose father figure, that being Thrall, kind of just left him and said, "Look at all this responsibility. It's all yours now. I'm out of here. I'm gonna go."
He kind of did go to save the world, but
he just. The problem is he left. He left at a bad time, both because the cataclysm was happening, and also because I think at the time there was some like shit going down in the Horde, which is why when Garrosh in that cinematic says you left me to pick up your pieces, you kind of Thrall just kind of left him with no guidance, no nothing, kind of just said, here, the Horde's yours now. I've got to go do this stuff. I know it's, I'm saving the world and whatever, and I know, Horde is cool and whatever. It's kind of in a bad spot for whatever reason. I'm out of here though later. He kind of just dips, doesn't really leave him with anything. I don't know. You're supposed to, regardless of what I'm saying, you're supposed to feel the slightest bit of sympathy for him because of that. Like Thrall did just kind of leave him with no like instruction or guidance.
Well, Bane just became war chief, right? Around that time?
No, correct me if I'm wrong. Bane's never been war chief.
Not war chief. What am I saying? High chieftain. I think that was right around the same time.
It was. So what happened is Thrall said, "I've got to go do shaman stuff and save the world. You're war chief now, Garrosh."
Right.
And then Cairn, Bane's dad, was like, I think you're cool, Garrosh, but you are not a leader of the Horde. I would rather like fight you and kill you and be war chief than let you lead. And so Cairn challenged Garrosh to Mat Gora. Cairn would have pummeled Garrosh into the fucking ground because it's a 13-foot fucking bull versus like a 7-foot, 8-foot orc.
Yeah.
The bull's gonna win, obviously. And but Magatha Grimtotem poisoned Garrosh's axe, and that poison killed Cairn.
Yeah.
And
okay, I do remember this now. Yeah, I think there's a lot of little like storylines going on in this new raid, and I'm kind of interested to watch it happen and watch everything like unfold because, like you said, you have the Anduin Sylvanas thing, you have an updated Uther model, which is MIA. We don't know where that's coming in or however that may
It's
turn
it's
out.
it's mainly the Garrosh thing because as much as you're supposed to hate Garrosh, I
Yeah,
think Garrosh is one of the best characters they've ever pulled off, which is really funny because if you think about it, Garrosh is literally Hitler. Um,
yeah,
but he's one of the best, I think, written characters for the most part. He's pretty clear and like what like his motivations and like
right.
what he's trying to do, and um there's not a lot of ambiguity that just feels nonsensical, kind of like Sylvanas. Like she just has a bunch of Valkyr that have saved her life 4 times already. Okay.
Yeah.
Um I yeah. And also she's
No, I
doing this
think
sort
I
of
think
grandiose
like you
behind the
just said,
scenes thing. Garrosh I think is one of the coolest characters I've ever done. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with him. Arthas, I don't know what they're gonna do to resolve that whole storyline. I think Blizzard runs the risk of pissing people off because we know that we killed Arthas and then Uther was like, "You're going to hell," and poured Arthas in the maw. I hope that they don't piss people off. It's one of those things where it's like I almost wish they didn't do anything with Arthas because it's
yeah.
such a cherished storyline. And
Well, that, but they kind of already messed it up
how?
with the um he wasn't in control thing.
No, that
Uh,
but that was clear though. That was clear since Warcraft 3.
That
Like
he like didn't know what he was
yeah,
doing,
that
kind of
was
thing.
yeah, that was completely clear. And actually, at
I thought that
some
was just cleared up with Bolvar.
no. No, yeah, 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 it was completely clear. Oh, you mean like with the jailer? Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking about?
like that
Oh,
whole.
I thought you were talking about like the Lich King or like Serenite controlling him. That was clear from
No, I
me.
knew the whole Serenite thing was like controlling him, but like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember there being like a whole thing about like, oh, if Bolvar, didn't like lost his sense of control for a little bit here and there. Obviously, Arthas did, but does that mean Arthas is in the wrong kind of thing? Because he wasn't doing it, but it was his body kind of thing. I don't know where, like, I don't know why I know this, but I remember seeing something like that.
Um,
It was like people saying like, oh, maybe an Arthas redemption because it wasn't really him, it was his body being acted upon or something like that.
if you're talking about, are you like referring to the Strathholm stuff?
No, like Lich King onward stuff.
Well, that's I guess. Um, it's hard because you have to. I really don't know. They don't. I don't think. Obviously, this is kind of hard for them to retroactively do. I don't think they were
Yeah,
gonna. They knew they were gonna write about the jailer at the time that they were doing Wrath of the Lich King.
yeah.
Um, but I don't think it's clear that Arthas knew about the Shadowlands and knew about like the jailer and all this grandiose stuff like in the Wrath of the Lich King. Now, obviously, again, you can say that that's just because of um they can't retroactively go and like, oh yeah, by the way, he knew about this. They,
Yeah.
you know, but we also haven't gotten any elaboration on that front since Shadowlands has been like announced in a thing. Maybe they'll
Yeah.
elaborate on it more. It's just weird because again, I know you said that they already kind of fucked up his storyline though, and I'm still kind of confused. It's like how I don't really think that the him not being in control thing really fucks it up. I think that makes him more um sympathizizable because like he's not like that. He's not
Well, that's
a
what I was
bad
like
person.
thinking because like I know you were saying that they shouldn't or like you would prefer if they didn't touch that storyline because it's like
Well, it's not that I wouldn't prefer it. I think they run the risk of pissing a lot of people off.
yeah. But
I don't know if I would prefer it or not. If that makes it like I
with what I was saying on the whole like they touched his storyline was and on the note that you said about like him not knowing about Shadowlands just because of probably when they wrote it, um Bolvar does say that he was able to peer into the Shadowlands and assume it, and that's where he pulled the forces. That's where you're able to pull the Scourge forces from.
Yeah.
So obviously Arthas was able to do the same. Um, but with his storyline wise, again, like I was saying, I don't remember where I saw it, but it was something on the lines of he wasn't conscious. That's the word I was looking for. He wasn't conscious in that time where he was the Lich King,
I
and they
heard it
used.
was I heard it was the See, I'm pretty sure it was the opposite because that's why he cut his own heart out is because you know about that, right? Like when he
Well,
was the Lich
like,
King, he cut his own heart out because he
yeah,
didn't I something along the lines of he didn't want anything to like I don't remember the exact reason why he cut his heart
I
out.
thought it was he cut his heart out because he didn't want any of Arthas left. It was like
Yeah,
the Lich King saying, "Hey, I'm cutting your heart out because I don't want any pure
well,
Arthas left. It's just the Lich
I
King."
think that's post Ner'zhul. Cuz
Okay.
if there's a period where Arthas is Arthas is still under control of Ner'zhul,
Mm-hmm.
and then Arthas is like, I'm having enough of this, and he actually I think kills Ner'zhul, like his spirit,
Right.
in like the armor, and so Arthas is now completely air quotes in control because I say parentheses because Serenite is kind of making him go nuts,
Yeah.
and that's I think that's why Wrath of the Lich King happened. I'm pretty sure that's why it happened is because Serenite. That's why they're
Mm-hmm.
mining it like endlessly in Pit of Sauron or whatever.
Yeah.
Um. Uh.
Oh no, I'll have to look into that later when we're done with the video because I'm actually curious about that now. But I thought it was he was unconscious and like didn't like he was obviously doing the acts, but it wasn't Arthas, it was the Lich King kind of thing. It was still him,
Well,
but
it was the Lich King was a separate entity until
right.
Arthas like beat out Ner'zhul because the Lich King was Ner'zhul,
Yes.
and then Arthas, mind games him, Jedi mind tricked him, and beat Ner'zhul.
Oh, I do remember that whole like in his head
I'm pretty
fight
sure
thing.
that was like a part of the fight on heroic ICC is you'd go inside of like his head. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong. Maybe I'm misthinking, but you'd go inside of like his head and like fight like a bunch of these spirits and stuff. I'm
I
pretty
remember
sure that
that vaguely
happened.
too, but I don't know if that was that fight. I'll look into it after the
I
video,
think
but
it was the fight. It may not have been the fight. It may have been some sort of one-off quest line. I don't remember.
mhm.
Um,
I'll look into that later
I'm pretty
for sure.
sure it was the fight though. I remember seeing, I remember seeing the world first where it's like the guy going usa tonta, usa tonta, usa tonta, and it's like during that fucking where you're in like all the souls and
The
whatever.
mine scene, yeah. I vaguely remember that too, so you might be right on that, but I'm not sure.
So
Any
yeah,
other thoughts on
I'm
his
looking
storyline? I'm curious
Arthas'
now.
storyline. I mean, I'm just that's all I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to them elaborating more on it. I hope they don't fuck it up because
Yeah.
again, I personally think the Arthur storyline is one of the greatest that has ever been told in like any media. It's incredibly easy to follow, but there is a lot of nuance and a lot of depth to it. It challenges a lot of moral decisions, like the Stratholme thing.
Yeah.
Um, it makes people think. I think it's a really good storyline. I hope they don't mess it up. It's hard. I don't know that I want Arthas to have a redemption arc because I think it's cool that he kind of died a villain-ish, sort of.
Yeah.
Because in the cinematic where you kill him, he's like, he makes it kind of clear he's been part of a nightmare or being tortured or something. Because he's like, is it
Mm.
over? And like, whatever. But at the same
Yeah.
time, he sees darkness, which is hell, which I guess we now know is. I don't. Okay. That one cinematic,
The Uther
the
one.
shadow, yeah, the Uther one. I don't know
Yeah.
how to take that because he says, I see only darkness before me. Do we know that he's seeing them like in the thing? I'm pretty sure that's what they're alluding to is that he can see
Yeah.
the dark angel coming to pick him up. But do we know that? Is he saying I see only darkness before me because he's already in the maw by that point? Like because I don't know how the Shadowlands works with like
Mhm.
travel and whatever and how spontaneous it is compared to relative time on Azeroth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it was the shadows coming to pick him up, and he obviously assumed the worst because of his actions. Um, because again, theorizing, if you die and you're going to like Bastion, you're obviously gonna see like, you know, heavenly light figures to take you to a better place, let's say.
You know what's all right? You know what's sketchy? If they were
What's up?
think of all these storylines that they've got going on of like old
Mm-hmm.
WoW characters. You have Garrosh, you have Arthas, you have Sylvanas, you have Kel'Thuzad, you have Ner'zhul, you have there's probably a couple others that I'm missing. Of all these old characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
What next? Because if we
Like
if we
expansion
if
wise,
no,
or
not expansion wise. If we
okay,
kill Sylvanas, that we're done with Sylvanas. Like we're not doing it anymore.
right,
She's dead, and we've already like done the whole like Souls bit because we will have been done with the Shadowlands.
right.
Or like
I
we're
mean,
wrapping all of these storylines up in one single expansion. This is like the whole like of what Warcraft has been built on. All these characters
yeah,
just dead, or not dead. Maybe not even dead. Just like we're
gone.
done with.
Yeah. Well,
Like probably for good. That's kind
you
of a
also
scary thought
have,
to me because that's what
yeah.
that's what Warcraft has been built on. It's Sylvanas, Arthas, Ner'zhul, you know,
I
Garrosh
mean,
a little bit because he was introduced in TBC, but
right. Looking at it, I think you still have a lot of older storylines that could be continued, like Tyrellian, um, kind of leading the alliance
you could
while
you
everyone's gone.
yeah, you could. The problem is I wouldn't really consider Tyrellian an old school character because he's been missing up until Legion.
Yeah, but you have that whole situation. But I think also the way they introduced a lot of the newer characters, they did it in a good way with Kalia. I mean, Kalia you didn't really see much of until like recent. She was just there. But with her, and then you have a lot of storyline, like branching storylines, I'd say, off of previous expansions with like the whole thought of the light takeover thing that everyone was thinking about happening after Shadowlands. But if you're talking specifically Shadowlands, obviously the Jailer's coming up.
Yeah.
But that whether that be the Jailer's next because we're already in that storyline, or we branch off to something else and then come back to him. I think we kill the Jailer in 9-2. Or at least fight him. And then he shows us something bigger, or we go into something else for 9-3. Just because if we're going to get on this track of, all right, Cybernathrius brought us into the Maw getting stronger, then we go into the Maw, fight Sylvanas, who's his right hand person, woman, whatever. I think it's only right to continue that storyline. I think branching it off is a bad idea, unless there is something that's introduced in this raid that we don't know about. That would be the 9-2 patch. Because they've been on that trend recently in the past couple expansions where, all right, you kill this person and then boom, something bigger's here. That isn't shown in the storyline originally. Like with BFA was N'Zoth. Like everything was, centralized in between the two continents, and then N'Zoth came in. With Legion, it was kind of the same thing. It was like demons around here, and then Argus came into play, and then you were fighting Argus. So they have that tendency of 9-3 being, or the third biggest patch being a out of the blue kind of thing.
I don't know. They said that they don't want to do that anymore, though.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I remember reading that somewhere. They said they don't want. They like the idea of the big bad, and they're gonna make the Jailer like the ultimate boss of the Shadowlands.
Yeah. Which I would like to see because, I mean, me and you
just don't
discussed that a
know
while ago. Was
if
it's
that's
nice
the
to know.
case. If that's the case, and we're already killing Sylvanas, what the fuck are we gonna do in between then?
That's what I'm saying. It has to be introduced in this next raid on who the next boss, like last boss of that raid, is gonna be, or something storyline wise. Because, like you said, we're killing Sylvanas, who has been, in close correlation with the Jailer for a good amount of time now.
It's theorized around the time that Varian died. I think that's when it's theorized.
Yeah. Also, on Varian, I feel like we're gonna see him with the whole Anduin situation.
No, they said that they're not gonna do that.
They're not gonna bring
They
Varian
said that
back.
they're not gonna touch on Varian, and they're not gonna touch on who's the most recent Horde guy that died.
Vol'jin.
No, Sourfang. They're not gonna touch Varian, and they're not gonna touch Sourfang. It's assumed that they're in the maw, but they explicitly said
Yeah.
that they're not gonna touch them. They'll elaborate on their deaths in regards to how it affects Anduin. They're still gonna elaborate on that,
Yeah.
but they're not gonna touch Varian or Sourfang, which I think is fine.
Okay. Since you mentioned him, did you see the trinket that Sylvanas drops?
Yeah, the old warrior soul. Yep, I saw it.
I think that's a pretty cool thing. That was
Yeah,
just a
that's
little
cool.
tidbit I saw in
I think
Wowhead.
it raises some questions in regards to what happened to Sourfang, because we know that every soul is being sucked into the maw.
Yes.
That means Varian and Sourfang are most definitely in the maw.
Right.
Does Sylvanas just have his soul for
I
some reason,
mean,
or is that just some sort of flavor item? Which I could see.
I think it could be a
I
flavor
could
item
see it
just because
being
of
a
her killing
flavor
him.
item, but it raises some
But
actual questions in regards to
yeah,
what happened to them.
I think it's just a flavor item just
I
because of
think it's a flavor
him
item simply
dying.
because it's a trinket. Now we
Yeah.
have the old warrior soul. Like what? We're walking around with Sourfang. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. He's just talking in your ear, like little devil, little angel on your shoulder.
But okay, yeah. Again, it raises some questions in regards to what happened to some of the characters that we haven't seen yet
Yeah.
that died post Legion, because that's again when it's theorized that they started doing the thing with the sucky suck into the maw.
Yeah. I'm glad that they're not touching Varian and Saurfang, just because I feel like,
I'm glad they're not
especially in
touching
this raid,
Sourfang because go ahead, go ahead.
I feel like especially in this raid, you have like we were saying, you have so much going on, so many different characters, so much like you have Kel'Thuzad, Sylvanas, Garrosh, Ner'zhul, possibility of Uther and Arthas. You have Anduin. Like there's just so many older storylines that are tying into this one raid. It's like I think it's good that they didn't add more, but I think them, like you said, elaborating on their deaths and the effect of it on Anduin, I think that'll be a good like tie off to both of their stories on like how everything was dealt with by Anduin, especially, Varian dying. Like that was obviously huge, but he couldn't really, dwell on it too much because they were like, hey, you're the king now, like you gotta start doing your thing. And then he was pretty close, like from the looks of it, him and Saurfang were obviously not like buddy buddy, but they respected each other very well
It's
compared to what the Horde was.
yeah, it's difficult for me because like the way I see it is I really wish that they would elaborate on what happened to them. But the problem I run into specifically with Sourfang is it's a bit too soon. Like Sourfang died a year ago,
Yeah,
and we're already like probably tying off his story, like going back to being like what happened to him. It just seems kind of weird. But at the same time, I don't want the Shadowlands to end and like two major lore characters that were super badass and everyone loved, just we
right.
don't know what happened to them in this expansion where we're supposed to find out what happened to our favorite lore characters.
Yeah.
Um,
I think they definitely touch it a little bit, but not to the point where it's like, hey, Varian shows up and he's talking to Anduin and fixes something, or same thing with Saurfang. I think it's like something small, like, oh hey, we kill Sylvanas and like we kill the jailer, the souls are released, and then maybe you see Varian walking around in Bastion, or maybe you see like something like that, to where it's a little Easter egg to them, but it's not like thrown at you. It's just like, hey, you see them walking around and it's like an NPC with a name, and that'll be it. I think that'd be a cool way to do it.
I mean, they've done that a little bit,
Yeah,
I think.
because you
Sorry.
do have a lot of NPCs that are named, and then like when I was leveling, like I would notice a name and I'd be like, why do I recognize this, or
Yeah,
should I recognize
we're
this and look
getting
it up?
Mechtineer Thermoplug as a battle pet. Isn't that just
Yeah, speaking of
hilarious?
like something like that, not putting Sourfang or Varian as a battle pet, but
Yeah. Um. So we've talked a lot about lore. I think we should talk a little bit more about like the gameplay stuff of 9-1.
right. The
Let's go to the one that the one that bugged you. Shoulder transmog. How you feeling? I know you actually said ew. I texted you saying
yeah.
apparently you can transmog one shoulder, and you said quote ew. So,
So I mean, yes, there is going to be cool things you can do with it. And I mean, it's not that big of an issue because it's like, all right, you can transmog your left and right shoulder. You'll be able to do some cool stuff with it. But I mean, I feel like that's either going to take away from some sets if you decide to do that, or it's going to add something unnecessary.
my only
Because like,
okay. So my thing with my thing with features like this is whenever they get introduced, everyone does it.
right,
And it becomes way less unique. Obviously, it'll fall off in time. Or not everyone's gonna do
it's
it.
like the
But
straight up orcs.
it becomes like, what's the best example I can give? The upright orc scenario where
Yeah,
everyone was doing it, and it just became, I don't know, it became the new norm, which is fine. I mean, that's how cosmetics work. It's a new feature.
I'm still
everyone's
wondering
gonna
when we're
try
getting
it.
upright trolls, but that's
I think it's cool that they're lanky and crouched over, because you realize upright trolls would be the largest race in the game by far.
yes, and I think we need to see it.
And there were already upright trolls, you know that, right? Zandalari trolls are upright.
I mean, yeah, but they're a little thicker.
The female ones aren't. The female ones are just straight up. I mean, the female trolls
Um,
in retail are already upright as well, I guess.
yeah,
Um,
but upright male trolls I think need to happen.
maybe it's just they would be tall. They'd be tall. They are taller than Torrent. Like lore
Yeah,
wise, they are taller than Torrent.
that's terrifying, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think so. The shoulder thing, I'm actually. It would get worn out super quick, but at the same
Right.
time, I would abuse the hell out of it because there are some sets. Do you know the Ruthless Gladiator leather set from Cataclysm for rogues?
Vaguely?
It's the one that I used to use all the time on my rogue. It's the brown one with like the big spiky shoulder on one side and like the little thing on the other. I think it's called Ruthless Gladiator. Um, essentially,
Oh, that's bright. I'm so sorry.
it's fine.
Make that smaller. Ah! Alright. Ruthless, leather, glad.
I think it's Ruthless. I could be wrong.
Is it the one with the like 3 spikes coming out looking thing?
All I know is that it's like a brown. It's like
Yes.
brownish.
This is the
grayish.
set you always use. Yeah.
It's a set I always use. One big spiky shoulder.
Yep.
Imagine making a set with just the big spiky shoulder on one side. It's just stuff like that.
Well,
It actually seems
yes,
really
but I
fucking
think
cool.
that takes away from. I guess the only shoulder like that is Herod, so never mind.
Yeah, the only shoulder
Not
in the game like that is Herod's. I'm pretty sure.
Herod's, which you get as the
There's like one Cataclysm. I think it's a Cataclysm. Maybe it's Mop. Like hunter set where it's like a big like a beast skull on one side and then like a little tiny little
yeah.
epaulette on the other. I think you know what I'm talking
I
about.
actually have that. There's another one in BFA. It's the shark mouth.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So okay,
There are a few items like that already in the game.
yeah.
I think it's
I
fine.
mean,
It's gonna be worn out. It's gonna be like the
oh yeah,
upright orc thing for sure. But
like you said,
there's
anything that's
nothing inherently
introduced
there's
is
nothing
gonna be
inherently
just
wrong with
abused.
it, and it encourages people to play the game more, to farm mogs more for that one-sided shoulder piece that looks super sick. So, whatever. I'm gonna use it. So
I mean, I don't care. I don't play retail.
yeah,
So what about the missing Primus?
we're going back to lore.
I mean, dude, there's just so much lore thrown into this one patch
I'll be
for
honest. I don't give a single f about the missing Primus. I really don't. I like.
I mean, he's coming back and we're seeing what his model was like as a Primus.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I actually was just looking at it.
Yeah, I mean it looks cool. I guess it's a neat story. It doesn't change anything though, like story wise.
I wish it
really.
did.
You
I
it
wish there
changed
was something like him
story-wise?
coming back, like not gives us power, because
I mean,
F
like
that.
it does give us power because now we have another one of the I think they're called the Eternal ones or
Mhm.
the first ones or whatever. And now we have another one of the leaders of the Covenants back,
Yeah.
which is good considering Anduin just kind of murked one. So +1 -1.
That's another interesting storyline. Damn, dude, there's
Um,
so much going on.
but eh, I don't know what to say about it. I really
Yeah,
don't.
I mean,
It's
he
kind of
looks pretty
expected.
dope. He looks like a old wizard dude
Yeah, he is.
with a colorful finger, but I mean, I hope there's something more to him. I hope there's a pretty cool storyline with him because I mean, he was such a I don't want to say a big figure, but like he was your Lego guy.
Well, wait, does that mean that we're not going to see the rune carver anymore?
No, probably
I guess
not.
get your screenshots while you can because he's going to be gone.
But also, there's going to be no soul ash required for the newer legendaries? Question mark. From what I saw,
Okay, see, that's something that we can. Yeah.
I did see a post about that earlier.
I don't know exactly how it works. It's not that the soul ash isn't required for newer legendaries. It's not required to level up your legendaries anymore. I think the way it works, I'm most likely wrong about this, but the way it works, I think, is the current 1 to 4 ranks of legendaries, you're still going to need Soul Ash for, but
Mm-hmm.
the ranks past that, I don't think Soul Ash is required anymore.
Yeah, because quote storyline, he's gone, so like you don't really need it.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they're just completely getting rid of Soul Ash in general. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know exactly what the headline or what it was
Yeah.
said. I do know that there's a crafting reagent tied to upgrading your legendaries, and it's bind on pickup, which is really weird because I am
Shadow Gast Ignite.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not the Shadow Gas Ignite, it's some orange item, which is really weird. That's a bind on pickup um crafting item because I'm none of the professions that I would need to
Yeah,
make
I don't know how that's
them.
gonna work then.
So yeah, we're still a ways off from 9.1 coming out.
Yeah,
Like there's so much content that isn't even out yet or fleshed out on the
I
PTR. Like
know.
people still haven't finished like the first quest line of the new zone because it's kind of time fill the bar gated like Throne Isle of Thunder was.
Yeah,
Where you'd fill a bar, but you can only do so many quests to fill that bar. You'd have to wait, a certain amount of time. Um, and then
I
you would
hope they
unlock
release it
more.
in a mannerly time though,
Timely
because like
manner, you
obviously
mean?
you want a lot of people to timely manner.
Manually time.
Wow, I need to go to bed. Um, a mannerly time. Um, just because I feel like if they try and drag it on too long, it's gonna just it's gonna get boring for a lot of people because you'll complete the quest line and then hey, that's it. But I think if they release it in a timely manner and continuous like let people be able to progress at a good pace, I think they would have a good amount of content in for the quest line. But I'm also worried that they're gonna wait too long and it's gonna be like dead content until this week it comes out and then hey we gotta wait another little while. So that's what I'm worried about with that aspect being back in the game.
um, I think they do a pretty good job. I don't really think that they have that big of an issue with.
Yeah, because there's like I know with every patch there is dead periods of just lack of content or
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
unfulfilling content, which is something I mentioned to you earlier. Is I think with it like PvP for example, a lot of it's just like hey, get 1,000 honor in this zone and then you're done with it. Um, I forgot who mentioned this, but I remember seeing someone mention where have like objectives in each zone, like we used to have with Terracar and Hellfire,
They did
and have
that
those. They did.
in BFA. They did that. They were kind of not quite objectives, but they did do it. You had the assaults in BFA throughout the
Yeah,
zones, but
those you would literally
those were
just
like
go do the ones
literally
where it's kill mobs and
scenarios.
then you leave. Like,
Yeah, but more importantly, we had Najatar, and Najatar did pretty much exactly what you're talking about. If you played War Mode in
mm,
Najatar, I won't lie, I played Najatar. I didn't like Najatar, but I could appreciate. I didn't like Najatar primarily because of the scalability of the zone. I think traversing it was terrible, and
yeah,
to navigate was one of the worst zones without flying they have ever made. But the PvP side, the open world side of Nashatar was fucking amazing. It actually was really fucking cool. Like every few hours or every hour you had this giant battle, like 50v50 of just Horde versus Alliance to like take, this part or whatever so they can get, more resources and rewards and mana pearls and stuff. I thought that was really fucking cool. And it worked out pretty well to the point where people were still farming it, albeit for player power reasons related to essences, I think.
You're right.
Where people were still farming it for, into 8.3. A whole patch later, which usually by that time that content's completely redundant, but people were still farming it. There are people, being like, hey, and Trey, they were like, hey, primarily Ruin Gaming, if you know Ruin, they would advertise all the time for people to come join, because there's a battle starting in 10 minutes.
Yeah. I think stuff like that's even cool, but just the whole like, hey, go collect 100 honor in the zone or something like that is just like, it's like
they could be better.
unfulfilling.
They could be
That's
better,
how I word
but
it.
at the same time, I don't know. Open world
That's what I
PvP
think. I just
isn't-
think stuff like that where you're, all right, go do this and it's the same thing no matter where you are, I think is just a very niche way to have content.
the
And I
content
think
in
that they could do
retail.
it way better.
The content in retail is especially stale. As a raider, I'm only raiding because I only raided because I wanted to raid with the boys. I love Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus this season completely killed my love for Mythic Plus. Something about the gearing and something about just how
Yeah.
the dungeons have been made, terrible. Nothing like BFA. I don't like it. It's not fun. And that really sucks. I think most people can agree the keys kind of suck compared to like 8.3, 8.2, whatever. Keys are nowhere near as fun. As far as raiding goes, the raid's been okay. There have been a few issues with some bosses, generals, that are the worst bosses they've ever made, on top of the raid itself being extraordinarily unrewarding compared to if you were like the best stats for Mistweaver I think are like mastery and versatility right now.
Right.
Guess where you got most of that gear?
Where?
PvP. All of that
Fun.
gear came from Conquest.
Oh. On PvP note, I'm gonna let you finish your thing in just a second. Thoughts on the PvP thing with the gearing, scaling in
That's fine.
battlegrounds and arenas?
That's fine. I don't really care. I think it's good. I think the idea of certain PvE pieces being, I know why they're doing it. Do you know why they're doing it?
Because a lot of PvE gear was better in PvP than PvP gear was.
Well, historically it's been the case for a while since they normalize all the stats and stuff, but I think the big reason why they're doing it is because if you look at some of the dungeon loot coming from the next mega dungeon, a lot of it has like special effects on it. It's got like chance on hit stuff going on.
Okay.
And they don't want to make that gear like hands down the best gear for PvP because PvPers don't like that. And PvEers don't like when PvP gear is best in slot. So I think they're trying to separate them a bit, which I think is good. I still think they should go the route of resilience and how they had it in MOP and maybe even WoD, because WoD had like a whole different side of it with like tournament gear. There was like legitimate, you go to a vendor and it would not be usable unless you were in a war game.
Really? I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? Yeah, there were vendors.
No.
It was at the Ring of Blood in New Nagrand, or I guess alternate Nagrand, where you would buy the gear and it would say tournament gear or tournament only or something, and it would not be usable outside of anything but a war game.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. So I don't care about the PvP thing. I think it's good.
Okay.
I think it just differentiates.
I didn't know if there
Warlords
was
as
any
fun.
like specific idea or thing that you were for or against with it, but
no, not really. I think it's fine.
I guess it's a good change.
I think the more you differentiate them, the better. The only complaint I've heard is that like some PvEers don't want to have to grind PvP to get PvP gear. But I'm sorry if that's the way you look at the game. That's literally how it's always been.
don't want to do PvP to get PvP gear.
Yeah, well, people like full time like raiders and mythic buzzers. You know, they
Yeah.
don't if they want to do the one-off arena, they don't want to feel left behind because they have a bunch of lower item level
I
PVE
mean,
gear. You know what I
that's
mean?
how, like you said, that's how
That's
it's
literally how it's always
been.
worked.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah,
I think that's how it should be too. I think if
I think so. Yeah, I agree. I think that's how it should be.
I don't think you should be able to push, higher arenas if you're not geared for it. Same thing, like vice versa. Like I know you'll still be able to do the content, but not to the extent of someone else who has just better gear in
Unfortunately,
like
what matters
PvP.
the most right now isn't gear. It's, I mean, gear matters, but right now it's really just how lucky are you in rolling the right spec, and how lucky are you in playing the right covenant? Not even lucky. Are you playing the right covenant, and are you just happening to play the right busted spec? Because right
Yeah,
now, arenas are. I've heard
not fun.
right now. I've heard that arenas are like Taco Bell. You either love it right now or you absolutely hate it right now. Personally, I absolutely hate it right now. I think it's the fact that like when I'm against the Warrior right now,
Yeah.
you would have loved Arena. You would love Arena if you played it right now, buddy. Um you would it, normally in Arena the way it works is you can predict what people are going to do. Like if you see like a Warrior Stormbolt, you can probably guess okay, he's probably going to do maybe some big damn here, right? That's
Yeah.
not how it works right now against like a Warrior, because they have Condemn, and Condemn sometimes likes to proc and hit for 12k crits out of fucking nowhere, which is like a third of someone's HP. You can't predict for that sort of thing,
Yeah.
especially not when they keep getting those procs and they just keep pressing Condemn, and like you don't know, like, okay, well this is like outside of Rec and Avatar and whatever, like I'll have to pop cooldowns for this, and then your cooldowns are blown for when he actually pops like Avatar and whatever, and now then you're just sad, and it's just not fun. It's not the way the game is. The game is much burstier now, but it feels like regular abilities are bursty and not like cooldowns are bursty. Whereas in MoP, the way it was is people are bursty as hell in their cooldowns, and so you
Yeah.
know when you see a cooldown, you do something. Right now, it's like
Just out of nowhere.
just out
Very
of nowhere,
sporadic.
Condemn hits really hard. Out of
Yeah.
nowhere, Monk's Rising Sun Kick hits for like 14k. Boomy Star Surge. I've had a Boomkin Star Surge hit me while I'm in like 25% verse gear, which albeit isn't the most I could have.
Right.
But I've had a Boomy Star Surge hit me right now. My health is about 40k as a priest with fort buff. Boomkin Star Surge hit me for 22k and like 25% verse. That is unbelievable.
Ouch.
And that's
Yeah.
just a regular filler spender ability. Like,
Not even a big
why?
cooldown spender.
Why is it hitting that hard? Literally no reason. So it's just not fun to me. Forgot how I started ranting about this.
I don't know. You kind of
Okay.
just go off sometimes, and
Yeah.
I just let you and I just
Yeah.
listen
Look,
because it's
man, I gotta get it off my chest. I gotta vent, man. Sometimes retail really gets to me. I want to love it so much, but Blizzard really likes not
really doesn't want you to love
letting
it.
you love it. I considered going back to my druid because I don't know. I miss my druid. We'll see. I might just not raid next year. Might just only Mythic Plus, but I can't do that
More
because
time for BC.
that too. Yeah, I do want to try and do both, but I might just play my druid because
For funsies.
don't even get me started on the whole covenant system, man. Oh man,
Isn't that like, aren't you, for your priest specifically, aren't you having to switch for like this?
okay. So right now,
All right, here we go. Put your seatbelts
all
on.
right.
He's going on another one.
I'm gonna because I know you don't play retail. Do you know how disc works in retail?
You ramp. You basically
What does that
put
mean?
bubbles on everybody, or not bubbles, but you put something on everybody, and then you go crazy, and everyone else goes crazy.
Okay. Essentially, the way disc works right now is we ramp every minute. What that means essentially is we put out atonement buffs. It's essentially kind of like
Yeah.
rejuve for druids. We put out like 20 of those. 19, not 20. We put out 18 to 19 of them.
Hmm.
Because you can't do 20. Timings don't work out. You put out 18 to 19 of them, and at the end of you putting out all of those, you press a button called Spirit Shell. And then what Spirit Shell does is it makes all of your atonement buffs, instead of actually healing the people with the atonement buffs with your penance and smite and stuff, you put up an absorb shield. And absorbs are really good in raid because you just completely prevent the damage. You don't lose health. You don't have to worry. Right? So what you do right now as a Disc Priest, which isn't how it's always been, it's really just, as far as I know, it's been just this tier that Disc Priest played like this because they brought back Spirit Shell. The way it works right now is, let's say every minute, boss has an ability that does, 20k to everyone in the raid. Just big 20k. The way it works is, okay, I see that ability coming in 20 seconds. I see that, or maybe not 20. I see that ability coming in like 15 seconds. I start ramping. I start putting up shields and shit.
Right.
Because I know that's going to happen, and I want to have enough time so that when that happens, my shields and everybody are just built up. Like, right now on retail, you get about 22k, I think, on like your max shields is what I'm doing, which is a lot. That's literally like 50% of people's HP in an absorb on everyone in raid. That is huge, and I can do that every minute, right? The downside to playing like this is in that 10-second window where you're building those shields, you can't move. You cannot be doing mechanics if you want to have a spirit shell, like a good one, because you need to be pumping into it within that 10 seconds. Like, that's your window. That's like a combust window for Fire Mage. Is the best way to compare it, but you're a healer. And it's a very powerful ability because, again, you're completely preventing damage for like everyone in raid. The downside to it, obviously, you can't move, you can't be doing mechanics in that window, and outside of that window, you're not doing anything. You're putting out like some atonements and you're pressing smite. That's pretty much what you're doing until your next ramp window, which is a minute later. The ability's, needless to say, the ability's really strong. They've already nerfed it. They made it 100% throughput, like from your healing going into a shield, and now it's 80%. It's kind of a big nerf, but it's still a good ability. Now they're changing the cooldown from 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. And why that's important is because the reason you picked Spirit Shell is because you could do it every minute. Whereas if you didn't pick Spirit Shell, your main cooldowns would be every 1.5 minutes. So now, the whole point of why you picked Spirit Shell is not only nerfed from what it was before, being 100% throughput, now it's literally the same cooldown as the other 2 cooldowns you get compared to only choosing one. I should say that if you pick Spirit Shell, it replaces your main cooldown, which is Rapture. So you only have 1 cooldown. Whereas if you don't pick Spirit Shell, you get Evangelism, which is another raid cooldown. Along with your other cooldown, which would be replaced by Spirit Shell, which is Rapture. So you get... Essentially, they're just completely gutting Spirit Shell. The problem with this is, I kind of rambled a little bit, the problem with them gutting Spirit Shell, and this is more so an overarching problem with the Covenant and Legendary system currently, is we've been playing as Disc Priest pretty much this whole tier exclusively with Spirit Shell. It is how you play the spec right now, is Spirit Shell. And it's, I don't want to say a completely different playstyle from the regular ramp without Spirit Shell, the regular playstyle, but it's a bit different. When you've been playing the Spirit Shell the whole tier, you get into a rhythm with it where you're looking, okay, every minute, I get one little mini ramp in between every single Spirit Shell. I have a timer set up to show, 20 seconds before the ability comes out. Okay, let me get ready. Let me start putting shields out, whatever.
Yeah.
Our playstyle changes now because of the nerf. Most likely, Spirit Shell is not going to be meta, and maybe by proxy, Disc won't be meta, which is huge because that never really happens.
Yeah.
So we're probably having to change our playstyle a bit if you've only been playing with Spirit Shell, which I have. I haven't played Disc outside of this tier. Now we're having to, because of that, we're having to swap our stats, because if you were Disc, you went Haste Mastery if you were running Spirit Shell. If you're not Haste Mastery, you're going Haste Crit with Evangelism. We're having to possibly swap Covenants because of that, because you would use the Vent Your Mind Games ability to just do a bunch of damage for that 10-second window and get a huge, 8k increase in your Spirit Shell absorbs on everyone. So we might have to be swapping Covenants now to an even more AIDS Covenant, which I don't even get me started on that ability. On top of...
Night Fae, right?
Night Fae.
Yeah.
which is essentially another power infusion button. On top of, we might also be having to swap legendaries now because of that. So it's not just like they're nerfing like one ability. It's how they're nerfing one ability, which is how a whole entire spec revolves, is completely cascading into forcing people to do a completely different thing than what they were doing before in terms of swapping covenants now and swapping legendaries now, which nobody wants to do.
Right.
Which is just a
It just
problem
puts you
with
behind, right?
it doesn't put us behind, but nobody wants to be swapping back and forth between covenants because they want to play their spec properly. Like, just no one wants to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the overarching problem that I have with Shadowlands, I think, is maintaining like best in slot is much harder when you add systems like the legendary system and more primarily the covenant system. I have a friend who plays HPAL who has been swapping back and forth between Kyrian and Venthyr literally every 2 weeks. Like, he keeps going back and forth because he wants to do two different things at once, and he just can't because of the way that like this systems
Yeah,
work.
how the
And
covenant system works.
it's terrible. I don't know why they thought it was ever gonna not turn out like this. Maybe it's a 1%er problem. I know there are a bunch of regular people who don't deal with this because they're completely content with being casual, and that's fine.
Right.
But as someone who tries to play to the best of my ability for the most part, it's a nightmare to deal with.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my whole spiel.
your whole rant.
I could go on for so long about
I
it.
mean, like you said, it might just be a 1%er problem, but they do. Blizzard does look at that a lot. The higher ranking raiders and Mythic Plus players, I think, from what I've noticed. So hopefully
A
there
little bit,
is.
but they don't look like they're gonna budge on the Covenant thing. They
Yeah.
haven't.
And I've always, like,
Mm.
I wasn't super against Covenant system, but at the same time, I wasn't, like, crazy for it. I always think the borrowed power
Oh,
systems.
I forgot to mention. Sorry.
No, you're good.
9.1. They're introducing Covenant specific legendaries.
Oh boy.
So now things get way more complicated.
Yep.
Why? Like, no one. The thing is, nobody asked for Covenant specific legendaries. I'm pretty sure most people would have said the opposite. Like, please don't make Covenant
I agree.
specific legendaries.
Well, just because, like, again, the whole issue with, let's say, Kyrian Legendary for you is just the best, so you obviously want to go Kyrian, but Kyrian's not that good for you, so you're sacrificing one thing for something that's better. And then, on top of that, just the whole borrowed power system, I think they need to retire fully.
I agree. I've had enough
I
of
think,
borrowed power.
for me, a very personal opinion, I think your character being powerful based on your gear and that's it
I don't know. Like,
is nice.
there was something about the Legion borrowed power that I was fine with for some reason. Like, I didn't like having a little talent tree that I bubble through, checkmark through these little things. I thought was
Right.
actually kind of fun, and it felt kind of good. Maybe I was just a
That was
worse player.
cool. I mean,
it wasn't like you literally just had to play the game. It literally wasn't even
yeah,
like. Obviously, at the start there was a huge grind because you wanted to get as much as possible, but
right.
you literally just had to play the game. There was no like do Torghast and make sure you do your weekly quests
Yep.
and make sure you grind
But something
your
where
renown and like there was none of that. It was literally just play the game and you're
yeah,
gonna get you're gonna
I
get
think if they had a Legion like
artifact power.
system with the talent tree thing, because I did, like you said, I did love that aspect of it. I think if you put that with a weekly cap of AP, for example, for artifact power, whatever, I think that would be a good way to do it. Talent tree system, weekly limit, just because that endless grind at the beginning of Legion
Well,
wasn't fun.
I never played at the beginning of Legion, but they did do that towards the end of Legion with oh man, I really Concordance. That's what it was called. It was that big bubble at the end of your weapon that was just
Yep.
basically a stat stick.
A never endless grind.
It sucked but it was essentially a cap because like you weren't gonna grind 24 million AP in a day, like you just weren't.
Yeah.
So
But you still like,
you still felt inclined to do it, but it
yeah,
wasn't as
because it
bad
was
as the
like,
Heart
hey,
of
let me go
Azeroth.
do all my
The
AP, all my
problem,
world
the
quests, and
problem
then
with the Heart of Azeroth is it was obtainable. You could legitimately obtain, you know, level 80 neck for Heart of Azeroth in like the first week of
yeah,
Nyalotha from level 70 or something, which, you know, it like you could see yourself doing it. You knew like if I just spent maybe 5 days grinding islands, right? I could do this. I could most definitely get it.
yep,
Whereas the Concordance thing, 24 million AP, that's
not
that's just
happening.
an example number, but
Yeah,
it's an example number for a lot of AP. You knew you probably weren't gonna get it, for a while. You weren't pressed
mhm,
about getting it, even if you were a high end raider. I don't think like they forced you to like, go for this concordance level or whatever. So they did kind of have a cap on it, but
yeah,
I think AP it's done with. I think most people don't like it. Blizzard says that they like it because it gives people an alternate avenue to progress their character, which I can kind of understand. But I think that should really just be gear.
yeah. I
Um,
agree. I mean, I always liked the feeling of knowing like, all right, like pre-bis for example, or bit like tier one bis, like reaching that point of like in that specific tier or whatever, like the completionism part of me where I'm like, hey, I got the gear I needed, or I'm the best geared I can be for this time being is always a nice feeling. I think the never ending minimal upgrades just kind of killed that for me. Because like being like, okay, I got these shoulders out of BWL. I don't need to worry about shoulders until maybe AQ, depending on what the bosses drop, or the next raid after that. Like just knowing that you have that set piece for a while and it's the best you can get for a certain period of time was always a
I mean,
nice feeling to have.
like it that does exist in retail. Like I know that like this helmet that I have for Mythic Plus is the best helmet I can get, and
Yeah.
it's not going away because I got it at 226. It's not going away. Um, it does exist in retail, but I wish a lot of that wasn't tied to the highest end of content, if you will. But it's hard
Yeah.
because I also don't want random Joe getting the same gear as me. Like if I put in the most time for the game, I don't want my only reward to just be clearing the raid faster.
Yeah.
I want to be able to flex on some people by having some pretty nuts gear, but at the same time, I don't want my gear to just be a flat stat stick that I get from, getting lucky out of my weekly chest for doing easy
Yeah.
content.
Because like that whole
That that's
mm,
my contention I think with the gear right now. It's just everything's so lame. It's just everything has two stats and it's it's two of four different stats. I think either we need more stats or we need more like on equip effects. I know Blizzard
yeah,
said that they said they're bringing tier sets back. They're not coming back in 9.1. They haven't come back in 9.0. When are they coming back? Um,
9-2. But even then you're like, okay, you get two tier sets when they first announced it, it kind of seemed like it was going to be promised
See,
throughout the
the thing is,
entire.
there's a lot of content that's being revealed right now, stuff that I didn't think they'd be revealing.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe we will see tier sets in 9.1. I don't think we will. Um,
But definitely the equip effects. Just adding more flavor, I think, is what they need.
well, they are
Adding
they
more
are. I mean, they
flavor.
are bringing back some equip effects. If you remember Karazhan from Legion, they're essentially
Mhm.
Karazhan. They've done this with actually every mega dungeon. Mechagon they did it with Karazhan, and they're doing it with this one. They are bringing on equip effects back. Though this one I
Yeah.
think has more. Oh, don't you? Oh, you didn't? Did you see that one hunter cloak or bow?
The quiver.
Yeah, did you see
Yeah,
that?
I saw it.
That's kind of neat.
Right.
Stuff like that is cool. I just hope
Yeah, I
I
think
hope
little
there's a
things like
creative.
that just to make each like obviously not have it for everything because then it's just overwhelming, but you know, having something that has something like a little weird to it or a small little
Well,
bonus on an equip effect, I think is pretty
see,
dope.
that could be too weird. That's completely changing an ability, and I know ability is just really just a tool for
Well, yeah,
player power,
but
but like,
like I don't know, just something to like you said, so it's not just the two stats with, you know, it just has more stats, but of these two, I think having some equip effects that are like I don't know that spice it up a little bit is what I would do. But
yeah,
I'm also classic Andy.
I'm really just hoping for tier sets, but
I hope tier sets come out because that was always so fun. Just because I remember we used to do this is like when the tier sets would be released, we would like go look at them and go see like the difference between LFR and you know normal and heroic and all that. Like it was always like, oh, how is this gonna look? And like stuff like that was always cool.
yeah, I mean they said they're gonna bring it back, so
I'm hoping it's sooner than later for sure.
it doesn't look like it, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't, and it's very depressing.
But that being said, I think we're gonna I think we can call it here.
Yeah,
I think we've
I'm
had a
done.
pretty good discussion. If
Whew.
yeah, I'm gonna be putting the Discord. Obviously, is in the description, guys. So if you guys do want to join the community-ish Discord, then by all means, go ahead and join. This is Dxm signing off with Snuffie. Uh, later.
Deuces.